the scene. He's got the voice that's mean, asking those questions that you never seen. He's got that fire, burning bright and clean. Andrew Keene making waves, break the routine on the Keen on show. He brings the heat, asking the minds, digging deep till they bleed. No sugar-coated truths, no lies to deceive. Andrew Keene, the master of the interview beat. He's got the knowledge, he's got the flair, challenging ideas with a fearless stare. With every question, he's uncovering what's there. Andrew Keene, a truth seeker, he's aware.
Hello, everybody. It is Thursday, the 20th of June. We're getting towards beach season, and it's appropriate to talk best books of June with our literary critic, our literary correspondent, Bethanne Patrick, the book critic of the LA Times, and the best read woman, I think, at least in the world. Bethanne, your recommended books for June. Let's begin with fiction.
Let's start with fiction, yes.
With a beach novel, not just a beach novel, but a novel about the beach, Sandwich by Catherine Newman. Tell us about this.
Well, this is a book, Andrew, that I just can't seem to stop talking about this year because it is set on Cape Cod. I spent a long time there. My husband and I co-owned a house there for a while. And so it's really familiar to me to be a woman in midlife who is spending time on Cape Cod with children and parents. Now, Catherine Newman's protagonist, Rocky, is there with adult children and really parents who are aging and having some problems. So this is an interesting counterpoint to another novel that's getting a lot of attention this spring, which is All Fours by Miranda July. I love that one too. But the thing about
you didn't love it that much. You didn't put it on the list.
I know. Well, I can't put that. I have to be careful about the lists. I don't get to talk about every book, but I love Sandwich because it is about that sandwich time in our lives when our children are growing up or grown, but we also have responsibilities for our parents and we're torn between the generations. And so Rocky, this protagonist, it's short for Roxanne. And she has gone on this 1 week vacation that her family takes together every year. And she wants to do everything the same every single time.
And this is very much a New England kind of thing.
A very New England kind of thing. And she wants to have a beach day. And then there's a lobster dinner night. And then there's the day when they do this and the day. And nothing is going to go exactly the way she wants it to. But so much love and heart and hilarity is in this book because it's very, very real. You can practically feel the sand on your beach towel or in your
you can taste the scallops.
You can. And one of the things I also love about the novel is it doesn't shirk talking about difficult things. And one of the things that's going on in this book is, I won't give any spoilers, but there is pregnancy and pregnancy loss discussed in it. And one of the quotes in the book is Rocky saying, "You're supposed to retrace your steps when you lose something. But none of my losses are like that. Where would I look for them? What would I do if I found them?" And I thought that is the kind of thing that we say to ourselves or we say to our nearest and dearest. We don't really know how to go back to the past and to think about the past, or we don't want to look ahead and see what might happen in the future, either to our dear children or our beloved parents. And it's just a way of looking at a woman's life that's very, I would say, close to the bone, but I really mean, down in the sand. And
well, speaking of down in the sand, the image of the cover of the book, Sandwich, for people who are not watching, is of a couple of chairs on a porch. But is this a book to read on a porch or on the beach itself in the sand?
I think it's either one, to tell you the truth. I think that this is one you can take to the beach and really enjoy because you will be laughing, but you won't be, guffawing out loud, if you will. Another interesting point I just want to say about it, given the cover with the Adirondack chairs and the beach towels and the sand, is that even though it's called Sandwich, it's clear that where they are is more like Chatham on Cape Cod. But I mean, who could resist using Sandwich as the title when there is a sandwich on Cape Cod? So kind of love it.
Well, you got a couple of other recommended novels. Both sound very interesting, although darker, more challenging,
Yes.
perhaps intellectually. I'm particularly intrigued by this one, Devil is Fine by John Virtue. Tell us about this.
First thing to say about this is I want to say happy Juneteenth. It's Freedom Day and freedom matters. And John Virtue has written this amazing novel. He's written a couple before. I believe this is his third novel. And it is about a multiracial man whose mother's family is white, and he receives an inheritance from his mother's father. But it's an inheritance that not only brings back some very difficult memories for him, but in the near future in the book will bring even more difficult memories. And so
Can we
on
be
the
more specific? I mean, it's a wonderful,
yes, yes, I can be
it's a
more
wonderful
specific.
narrative, or an intriguing narrative. What
It
does
is
he
an
inherit?
intriguing. He inherits a place that was a plantation, a southern plantation.
And whereabouts in the South is this set?
And this is set in why can't I now this is what you asked me. Oh gosh, is it Tennessee? Uh,
Let's see. It doesn't.
I
I'm not
can't
sure if
remember.
it says, but certainly somewhere in the South, a place where they used to have slavery, at least.
Yes, a place where they used to have enslaved people.
So it wasn't
And
great. It certainly wasn't Cape Cod.
no, it's not Cape Cod. And I'm sorry, John Virtue, for forgetting exactly where it takes place, but I did read it several months ago. What I want to say that is so interesting about this novel is a couple of things. One, again, no spoilers. You see dirt and jellyfish together on the cover. And the dirt, of course, refers to the dirt of the land that this unnamed narrator, more on that in a second, has inherited. But it also has to do with the excavation of that land and what is discovered. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that they discover bodies of enslaved people who had worked and lived on this property. And so the narrator is really conflicted about, how can I accept this place? How can I accept
Mm.
this inheritance? But there's a couple of other things about him. Number one, I mentioned the jellyfish. There's a lot about jellyfish in this novel, and some of it is a little bit of magical realism. Some of it is just plain painful realism. And
Well, they're not the friendliest of creatures. They can really sting you.
They
Can't
can really sting you. And so he has some experiences on beaches that really, so it can't be in Tennessee. It must be in Alabama.
Or
But,
Georgia,
but anyway, the
or Carolina.
jellyfish,
It could be one of those places.
yeah,
Actually, earlier this month, I was
actually,
in. I went to visit Monticello because I
yes,
was in Charlottesville, and it really struck me. The whole point of Monticello, I'm sure you've been there lots of times, is
yeah.
to glamorize Thomas Jefferson. But it really brought home to me, even if it wasn't necessarily meant to, the nature of, I guess it wasn't a plantation, but the nature of places where slavery operated, and it was the slaves who did all the work and the whites who
You know,
sat around doing nothing.
it's very interesting you brought that up because just this week, archaeologists at Mount Vernon, at George Washington's home, found, I don't know how many, a lot of glass bottles, large glass, like jugs filled with preserved fruit. But here's the thing that's connecting what you just said to Mount Vernon. In the article about it that I read, it said in one line that this fruit, which is perfectly preserved, I believe it's actually edible. Um, it's perfect. And they said, well, that would be because the woman who was in charge of the kitchens knew what she was doing. Her name was Dolly, and that was it. And I thought, how shocking it is that Dolly does not have a surname. And this ties in, Andrew, to what I want to say about Verter's book. The narrator is unnamed all the way through. And Verter has said several places that this is part of a long history, a tradition of unnamed narrators in books by Black authors. It is a way of retaining some selfhood. It's a way of keeping possession of what belongs to you, what no one can take away from you.
And it's is this a beach book, Bethanne? I mean, it's about the beach. Again, we're in our unnamed southern state.
Yes,
where
and
he
you know what
travels
I
to the
just
beach.
recalled? It is actually in a mid-Atlantic location. It actually is, on the Atlantic side of things. It is not on the Gulf Coast.
So
So
it's probably Carolina.
yeah, exactly. So what I want to say is this might not be your typical beach book. I don't always recommend typical beach
Well, if
books.
you like a nice sting in your beach books, then
There you go.
Devil is fine. And then the third in our trilogy, we've done New England, we've done the Mid-Atlantic. Now we're in California with this book, which again sounds really good. The Future Was Color. It's not really a book about color in the way in which Americans obsess over color.
Not at
It's a
all.
book about the decadence of Hollywood and post-war Los Angeles. Another very intriguing book.
It's a really intriguing book, and it's a truly excellent book.
Patrick Nathan, of course, is the author.
Yes, Patrick Nathan is the author, and this is set in Hollywood in the 1950s during the Lavender Scare, which is when McCarthyism went after homosexuals, male homosexuals specifically. And so this is fascinating to me because Nathan got the idea for the novel when he'd been sort of, taking, I don't know, a day off and just looking at things around him. And he saw in small print on a movie poster a Hungarian name. And he saw that the scriptwriter for this sort of B movie was named something like Laszlo György. And he thought, how interesting. What would it be like for someone in the 1950s to be from Hungary living in Hollywood? So from this, he has given us this fabulous character named George, who left Hungary when he was 14, endured fascism and all kinds of problems, came to the United States and made a life for himself in Hollywood as a scriptwriter. And so this is about a time when George, who is a not completely closeted homosexual, is sort of dealing with the way society looks at people like him. And he's also dealing with the way that everything is now turning to color, Technicolor movies. And, it's very important to get all of the colors right. And so you see this beautiful cover with a man lying face down on a pool float. The float is
Another
pink.
summer image to add
A
to
wonderful summer image. And he sort of goes from his life into a couple of weeks of decadence at the mansion of some people who have a great deal of money. But again, this is the idea of how we interact with other people from our authenticity into theirs. And it is the story of an emigre who destroys his old life and builds a new one. And he has to think about what it means to be building this new life in Hollywood, a place where everything is commodified. So Nathan is a writer who has a keen eye for class and, the way capitalism works. And I think this is one of the most readable novels about class and economics that I've ever seen. It is really a pleasure. You can take this to the beach. You can completely lose yourself in The Future Was Color.
They have social class, Bethanne, in Los Angeles? I didn't know.
I don't know. In Los Angeles, I guess, social class depends on where you...
And of course, he was fleeing the communists in Hungary.
Yes.
So the issue of class and politics of class must have been particularly interesting in the way he treats the book.
Absolutely. The prose is just so beautiful. So it's really one of those books that you forget about the words while you're reading. You will be in George's world.
So again, on the porch or at the beach, Bethanne, this one?
On the beach. This one's on the beach.
Well, we are speaking with the great Bethanne Patrick, the best read woman in the world, amongst other things, the book critic of the Los Angeles Times and many other things. I want to remind everyone that great guests like Bethanne are brought to Keen On by our friends, not just at Liberties, who are our traditional sponsor, but also our friends at Disorder, wonderful new podcast by my friend Jason Pack, the podcast that orders the disorder of the 2020s rather than the 1950s. Going to run a short feature on disorder. They're really focused on the British election. Jason divides his time between the East Coast and the United Kingdom, so he's a particular authority on what's happening in the United Kingdom. So we'll run a short feature on Goalhanger, and then we'll be back with Bethanne Patrick to talk about her 3 recommended nonfiction books for June 2024. So don't go away, anyone. Don't go to the beach. We'll be back in a second.
The chaos in the news every day, and that we lurch from one crisis to the next without any coherent vision from our leaders. I find Starmer so inspiring and so messianic. It is his non-messianic personality which is messianic. At Goalhanger's Disorder podcast, we're tired of people who harp on the negatives with no solutions. We try to order the disorder.
We will likely have a government that wants to do more in terms of supporting international law.
Over the next few weeks, we're going to see how July's result could impact Britain's role in the world and change everything in the US elections. I am just so excited because Biden has not been doing so great. This is something that's going to be giving him 1 to 2 point difference in places like Michigan when Starmer comes in with a 60 or an 80 seat majority. Search Disorder in your podcast app to listen right now.
We are back with Bethanne Patrick on our monthly show focusing on best books. We dealt with in the first half of the show with Bethanne's recommended fiction books for the beach. One was called Sandwich, and she mentioned that there was a pregnancy narrative, or at least one of the characters was pregnant, and lots of interesting stuff on that. The first book that she recommends in her nonfiction books for June 2024 is The Fall of Roe, The Rise of a New America by Elizabeth Dias and Lisa Lair. It's already a bestseller. I'm guessing in the future, Bethanne, novels will have to politicize the issue of pregnancy.
Oh, this is a tough one. But I do want to say, when it comes to novels, that we know we've already had novels that have predicted what has happened with the fall of Roe. And we've had The Handmaid's Tale. We all know that Margaret Atwood has been, prescient on this. And what Diaz and Lehrer, who are both New York Times reporters, are prescient about is they knew, and they can prove this through their reporting, that Roe loomed so large in our lives that so many of us believed it wasn't ever going to go away, that it was always going to be there. And they have carefully reported for a long time now on the forces that the pro-life movement has gathered. And those forces are not always, shall we say, rational or about research or about even real feelings, that people have, or real actions that they take within their own families. They tend to rally people behind things like the false claims that Planned Parenthood was selling fetal body parts.
So this is not a book that acknowledges, at least in part, a credible moral argument from opponents of abortion?
You know, what they're showing is they actually, I mean, of course, they acknowledge that there are people who have arguments that are credible because they are based on morals or faith. But it is not the mainstream pro-life movement has been eclipsed by the fringe elements in the pro-life movement.
And that's the subtitle of the book, is The
yes,
Rise of a New America. So
yes.
this, I mean, we've been doing a lot of shows on this month. Is this new America really new, or is it perhaps a legacy of the 90s or even an earlier period?
It's definitely something both of the authors would say it's been happening for at least a decade, if not longer. As you said, I don't know if it goes all the way. I keep thinking, the 90s were yesterday, but really they were 30 years ago, more at this point. And I'm not sure if DS and Lehrer would say, okay, let's go back to the 90s or the 80s to see this. But they would definitely say, let's look back 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, and we can see how certain people, how certain very, very noisy, it's a very vocal minority, have decided we're going to make this our issue. We're going to make this our single issue. Everything we do, everything we say is going to be about this. And it isn't necessarily because, as you said a few minutes ago, there is a moral belief underlying it. It's more because this is a way
But isn't that politics? I mean, if it was a subject that progressives were more comfortable with, race relations, civil rights, then everyone would be celebrating political success.
Well, this is the problem, is that whatever it's all about women. It's all about women being, thought of second. And they've got, this chronological structure in this book that goes from, the righteous fight, which is headed mostly by a woman named Marjorie Dannenfelser, who's an activist in the spiritual battle about what it means to be human. Okay. And then we go on to the political war, and we also go on to, some of the ways that the country's mood has shifted because of political figures like Donald Trump. And then what do we do?
Who's that character you just brought up?
I guess I'm supposed to say President Trump.
Ex-president, maybe we should call him.
Your former, yeah, exactly.
I mean, he seems to be all about women, but not in a particularly good way.
Not in a good way. And so the last section of the book, Fate of the Nation, is about what does it mean to live in a nation that has put so much political effort behind making sure that women's reproductive choices are limited. What does it mean that the Supreme Court has been flipped? And so they're looking very carefully at these forces. They are not trying to say abortion is right or wrong. They're trying to say, this is what we had, and this is how it was overturned. And this is what we're facing now.
Any dealings with the Catholic Church? I mean, after all, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think it's a massive amount of Catholics are on the Supreme Court, very strident Catholics. Of course, Catholicism has taken up the abortion case. Do they talk about the church in the book?
They mostly are talking about the factions in the church that are vocal on anti-abortion, the factions that actually send people out to, lecture, educate, march on these things. So they don't deal with the church as a whole and the church's dogma around abortion as a whole. And of course, we also know that right now, the Catholic Church, the Pope has said a few interesting things in the past few weeks, and I'm not sure how that will affect
You
the
know what?
way.
Yeah, I think maybe we should get the Pope on the show.
Oh, that would be, you know what? We could have a really good time.
If Pope's watching, Mr. Pope, you're more than welcome to come on. You come on with Bethanne.
Yes,
It's all about women this week. We've
it
done
is all about women
Sandwich,
this week.
Catherine, with Catherine Newman, a book about female relations, intergenerational ones.
Yes.
Consent. The Fall of Roe, of course, is all about women, women's reproductive rights. And another of your nonfiction books is also all about women, or all about a certain woman, Jill Cement, a very interesting memoir, Consent. Tell us about Jill and Consent.
This is an amazing book. This is the most.
It's getting a lot of press. I've already read
It's getting a lot of press.
reviews
It's the most honest memoir. And I have another memoir I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes that's also honest, but this is like a new level of opening up a vein. And so what happened is, when Jill Cement was 16 or 17, she went to New York to become an artist, or as she says, to be an artist. And she started taking classes from Alfred Mesches. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He was a well-known artist, a realist painter originally, and he was in his 40s. He was married. He was also having an affair. He already had a mistress. He had kids.
Surprise.
Yeah, 17-year-old Jill. They had a kiss. They embarked on an affair. And she wrote about 35 years later, she wrote a memoir called Half a Life. And it was mostly about half of her life, but it ended with her meeting Alfred and their relationship beginning. Okay, fast forward. They were married from when he was 45 until he died in 2016 at the age of 93. They had, by all accounts, from Cement and others, a really good, long, solid marriage. Very, very satisfying for both of them. But he died, and Cement started thinking, did I really do the right thing? Who was the seducer? Who was the groomer? Am I in the wrong? Was Alfred in the wrong? What does it mean if both of us were wrong? And, she wonders, is my marriage fruit from a poisonous tree? That's a big question to ask yourself and to put out there in public. And what she finally comes down to, and this is what I thought really made the book not just strong, but worth reading, is that she says it's all about agency. Did I have agency? And she's not trying to say, let's allow underage kids to have affairs with much older men. What she's trying to say is, I needed to look back at my memories and understand whether or not I was capable of being.
Are there any jellyfish in this one?
There are no jellyfish, but I'm telling you.
Herself? Does she end up stinging herself?
I think she does in some ways. I think she does sting herself. But you know what? Here's the most beautiful thing. Is at the end, of course, he's 93. He's diagnosed with advanced leukemia, and he dies. But she says toward the end, or at the very end, in fact, listen, that first kiss we had, there are a lot of questions to ask about it. But our last kiss, no one could question.
Well, it's another interesting book. Though one wonders again about formal or informal rules about what one should and shouldn't write about one's own life. I mean, did that occur to you that, this guy must be turning in his grave?
Well, I have myself, as you know, Andrew, written a memoir that had things in it about family members that maybe people would have liked me to have kept to myself. Once the cat is out of the bag, I think you owe it to everyone to look at things as clearly and honestly as you can and to put yourself in as vulnerable a position as you do anyone else. So,
well, that's unambiguous.
yeah.
Bethanne, we our third novel in the first half of the show was about Hollywood in the 50s, about the Lavender Scare by Patrick Nathan. Future with the Future Was Color, and our final non-fiction book is also a Hollywood memoir, The Friday Afternoon Club, a family memoir by Griffin Dunn. Tell us about this book.
Well, this book is a really, what I want to say is it's about as far from another celeb memoir as you could possibly imagine. You might think, oh, Griffin Dunn, I remember Johnny Dangerously. What else has he done? And just think, why bother? This is a book that is really about a family that is obsessed with, they're defined by tragedy, but obsessed with words. So Griffin Dunn's father, Dominic Dunn, was an incredibly successful author and journalist whose pieces in Vanity Fair, including pieces on the O.J. Simpson, trial, they were just read by so many people.
And who was he married to, of course?
He was married to Griffin's mother, Ellen, but he was his brother.
This is another Dunn.
His brother was John Gregory Dunn, who was married to Joan Didion,
who wrote also a memoir about that. So
exactly.
A tangle of memoirs, of celebrity memoirs. A tangle
of memoirs. And so basically, what happens in Griffin's life, he was one of 3 children. Dominic Dunn, as many, many people will know, later in his life came out of the closet, had problems with alcohol, everything, but still was a major American figure.
So like our fictional Hungarian hero in the Future.
That's right. That's right. So, but what I want to say about this one is when Griffin was, I'm forgetting his age, but his sister was just 17. She was in Hollywood. She was a model, an actor, and she was strangled to death by a man named John Sweeney, her boyfriend. And that murder changed their family forever. It really, as I said, it was the tragedy that defined this family and changed the way they related to each other. But Griffin Dunn is an amazing writer. This definitely, I would say, is one for the porch. And the reason I say it's for the porch instead of the beach is you want to pay attention. You don't want to get lost in it. You want to be there. It's very, he is also very vulnerable, very hard on himself, but he shows what it means to be a young man growing up and coping with fame while you're also coping with a lot of relationships. And his mother developed multiple sclerosis. He and his brother, Alexander, had to cope with that. And Alexander had a serious mental illness. And there's a lot.
Not worth being a celebrity these days, is it, Bethanne?
It is. I loved a line that Alexandra Jacobs wrote in the New York Times about this book, which was that Dunn has a gingerly attitude toward fame, having witnessed its costs firsthand.
Well, I haven't read any of these books, but if I had to choose one, I think I would go with, it's a rather boring choice, Consent, because, no, actually I wouldn't. I think I'll go with Fall of Roe, because that's my kind of nonfiction.
It is your kind of nonfiction.
But what about you, Bethanne? So I've chosen... You're not allowed Fall of Rome. Fall of Roe, not Rome.
If I had to read just one, let me think for 1 second. I think it would be Devil is Fine by John Vircher.
Well, Bethanne, as always, it's a real pleasure, honor to have you. You are the most generous and hardworking person in all the book world. You read everything and then you come on our show and tell us what to read.
Love it.
So you better go away now and start reading for July, because we'll see you in late July. Have a wonderful time on the beach. I know you're traveling a lot in July, and we'll talk again in a month. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Bye, Andrew.
Can I step on the scene? I'm ready to He's an expert.